Welcome to The Skinny. I'm your host, SHAYZON. So many things happening all at the same time. Incredible conversations, communities being built, dreams being realized, and movements ignited and reignited. So much to learn and even more to experience. This season on The Skinny, we dig deeper, cutting the fat and getting right down to the nitty-gritty on topics that impact our lives. I'm so excited to highlight amazing stories and facilitate impassioned voices and conversations, eager to share, learn, grow, and evolve with you into even more amazing, enlightened, and empowered souls. So come on, honey bunnies, let's do this. It's showtime. Hi, honey bunnies. Welcome to another amazing episode of The Skinny with SHAYZON. I hope you're doing amazing. And if this is your first time, welcome. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much again for sharing your time. You are truly appreciated. I have such an amazing time preparing each and every episode for you guys to enjoy the show. And I had the opportunity to connect and speak with so many amazing people in previous episodes. And I love that, like, beyond words. There's so many incredible people, and it always allows me to learn and experience new things on a continuous basis, which I'm so incredibly grateful for. And I had the opportunity of being interviewed for a show a few weeks ago. And during that interview, I was asked a question by the host about my thoughts on the impact of upcycling and the plus size community. And it completely stumped me. Why? Because I had never before actually given thought to that question or perspective. And I immediately realized that this was a conversation that I needed to have on a more in-depth level, and also a point of view and experience that needed to be shared. So with me on the show today is LaVee, a wonderful and eclectically fashionable lady, licensed therapist who operates her own private practice, an avid thrifter for over 30 years, and the host of Thrift Therapy podcast. She dives into the psychology of thrifters, which I think is so amazing, because there probably is a science to this, so there has to be psychology to this, and I am not even going to wait any longer. LaVee, welcome to The Skinny. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to continue our conversation.
This is something that I've been thinking about since we spoke, and I've been looking forward to this. So let's jump right in. How are you?
Pretty good. I've been noticing that as the decline of the world around us increases, I have had some ups and downs, but I've been able to really level myself.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about yourself, including how you got into thrifting, how long. I mentioned before, it's like over 30 years, but when did you actually start thrifting?
Well, at my age, it's kind of hard to remember the details of the past, but I do remember the experience of finding thrift. And I was living in the Houston, Texas area, was a teenager, and we had moved from a small town to the outskirts of Houston. And so this was like maybe like heaven or Mecca or some kind of like fabulous awakening that I had during that time. Like, oh, this is the life I want for myself, is being around all different kinds of people, experiencing a wide variety of things. And during that time, I found thrifting. So it really kind of fit in with maybe what was going on with me as a teenager, which was my identity development. That's what people are doing during that time with their emotion development, is finding out who they are. So the first time I walked into a thrift store was actually a resale boutique. And there was an area of town in Houston. It's still there. It's called the Montrose area. And it's very eclectic. And at the time it was the gay part of town. I'm using air quotes. And it was like home away from home for me. Whenever I could, I would go there and feel really comfortable. And so I started entering those boutique shops, so there's what we call like resale shops now, but they're curated.
Right.
And so I started buying some things to integrate into my wardrobe. And I thought, where do they get these things from? And so I talked to a couple of the shop owners, and they told me about thrift stores. And so I tracked down a thrift store. This was before cell phones. So it was quite an interesting thing to try to find a thrift store.
Mm-hmm.
And I found one. And as soon as I walked in, I vibed hard. I was like, this is where I belong. I want to
Mm-hmm.
shop here. And I have been shopping at Thrift ever since. So I guess that was when I was 16. So like 44 years.
It's really just like a huge candy store, a huge playground of opportunity. It's one of those things that once you get into it, you do get hooked. In addition to being an avid thrifter, of course, you're also a therapist. So what's your area of specialty?
I work in private practice,
Mm-hmm.
so I deal with what therapists might call your garden variety issues a lot, which are,
Mm-hmm.
mood disorders and partner conflict, family conflict. But I also specialize in serving the LGBTQ plus community, and I do transition work with trans persons, and I work with gifted adults.
Is there really a psychology to thrifters, the way they thrift?
Absolutely. And I think that's true of any shared maybe like shared activity that humans do is,
Mm-hmm.
psychology is really just about our minds. It's like, how do we process the information that we're generating and receiving? And so anything that a person does has a psychology to it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you want to talk about that psychology, like on a podcast, it's because it's a group kind of experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like more than one person does it.
Right.
So because there's, more than one thrifter, of course, there's a psychology to it. There are
Mm-hmm.
patterns.
So while I was a guest on your show, like I mentioned earlier, Thrift Therapy Podcast, you posed the question to me and about upcycling, and it literally stumped me in my tracks. Like I was just like, wow, not only is this an amazing question, but it's one of those that kind of like makes everything stop. And the question was, what did I think about the issue of plus size thrift clothes being upcycled into clothes for smaller sized people? And in that moment, my heart sank. I knew I needed to hear more about this and find out more and learn more about this perspective of upcycling because it was my first time hearing that. And it's something that immediately felt important to me in this space of thrifting and upcycling. But before we move on, I wanted to be sure that we're all on the same page. All of the listeners are fully understanding what upcycling fashion is. So upcycling is something that can be done with anything, actually. It's in the fashion area, it's in decor, it's in household items, and but we're gonna like zero in on fashion for this particular episode. So upcycling clothing is known as like a creative reuse and redesign or repurpose. There's so many words that can be attached to it. But it's the process of actually transforming what someone may consider, torn, damaged, useless, or just something that's like an unwanted garment. And what you do is you create it in such a way that it becomes something new that's now of higher value and purpose to you as the individual than how it was in its original state. So that's what upcycling really is and what upcycling fashion really is. And it's something that has been around for centuries. This is nothing new at all, especially for people and families in the lower to middle income demographic. My family and I have been upcycling things for as far back as I can remember, living in Jamaica and here in the States. Do you upcycle now? And did you upcycle with your family when you were a teen?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that question because I think one of the reasons that I fell in love with the thrift store is because of my family background. My dad was a minister, and not only that, he was an evangelist. And so we were pretty poor, I think, by most standards because of the lifestyle that my parents lived. And my mom is an incredible seamstress. And what she would do is take us to stores like Neiman Marcus and I don't know, I just remember that one, but all the stores of the day and do sketches of clothes that she wanted to make for us and then go home and replicate them.
Wow.
Because we couldn't actually afford to shop there. But it's an interesting thing when you're a preacher's daughter, your family is sort of expected to set some kind of standard for the flock, right? And so there's all this pressure to maybe like look your best, be your
Right.
best. So my mom was doing that, so that we could look our best. Unfortunately, what she thought was cool and what I thought was cool was really different a lot of the time. So
Uh-huh.
when I found the thrift store, I felt like, oh, now I can finally wear what I want to wear. Look at all
Right.
this cool shit. And my mom isn't going to be involved,
Uh-huh.
So I
Uh-huh.
got to cut her out because I could afford it, right?
Right.
So it was
Right.
cheap. So yeah, so when I started thrifting, I didn't want anything to do with sewing. I was like, no way. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I can curse on here. Uh, no way. I'm not sewing anything ever again. So at first, no, I didn't upcycle. I
Hmm.
would look for things that fit my personality, and sometimes I'd wear things with holes in them, even if I thought they were cool, but I wasn't going
Right.
to touch a needle.
Right.
But now, my mom had taught me how to sew. So I do upcycle, and I like to create things even more unique because thrifting is kind of having a moment.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
it's raised the bar for creativity on my end. I think I still want to look totally unique.
I just realized that we do have so much more in common beyond thrifting because I'm also a preacher's kid, and that's the same thing. My dad was traveling around, and so at that point the whole family's traveling around, and
Yep.
it's the same thing. And there is that mindset or pressure probably for the mom of the family at that point to make sure that you are an example. That kind of weight is there, but at the same time you're not earning like this tremendous amount of money being a pastor or evangelist. So you do have to figure out creative ways of making this happen. What upcycles do you enjoy doing the most?
Well, for sure, it's furniture. Excuse me, my dad is also a very handy person, as am I. So he taught me a lot
Hmm.
of carpentry skills and do it yourself skills that I
Hmm.
rely on regularly and have expanded on myself. I've taken woodshop class and I know how to build my own canvases. I've tiled my house, like I do lots of DIY projects. So I
Hmm.
love finding really cool furniture at the thrift, and then especially beat up and cheap, that's my favorite, and then
Yeah.
just reinvigorating it, giving it a new life. And when I look at it, and here's the psychology part, when I look at that piece, every time I look at that piece, I see how far it's come.
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, look at
Hmm.
you. You were on your last leg, like literally, and I
Uh-huh.
saved you. And you are here now, and you are lovely and wonderful. You're such a survivor,
Uh-huh. And then
Stuff
you
like
get
that.
attached.
Oh, absolutely. And I get these, good feelings all day long because my whole house pretty much is secondhand. So
Uh-huh.
I'm walking through all these things every day, and I have such a strong connection with them because I was able to see through the wear and tear to the beauty,
Hmm.
and I guess that's a really good look into my personality.
Yeah, it's interesting because it used to be, and sometimes still is, looked down on by some people or seen as something
Hmm.
that, poor people do or did. Um, but thankfully now, because I mean, we were doing it regardless of what people were thinking or being teased or being, thought of as whatever. But thankfully now it's being embraced and talked about in a more positive way, especially because it's now contributing, or they're now more aware of its contribution and positive impact on the environment. So like you mentioned before, it's a thing now. It's now being more embraced by the larger community, and taken on, where it's like, upcycling, like you said, furniture and clothes and thrifting on a whole. And my New York apartment was completely decked out with furniture that was either found on the sidewalk, where I would just like turn that truck around and it's like flip the yep, that's a chair that will
Yep.
work. We can cover that. The thing is that even with all of the amazing benefits and the fun and creativity of upcycling and finding the ways to extend the life of like clothes in particular, there is that downside about one of the ways that upcycling has completely taken off over recent years. And I don't think that many people are probably aware of this, But in the large community of thrifters now, there are a lot of people that upcycle their clothes, and it's, a term that's called like thrift flipping or
Mm.
thrift redesign. And what it is, it's like taking thrifted clothes that don't necessarily fit or look like something that you would wear as is in its current state. And they buy it, the thrifters will buy it and redesign those garments into completely new looks. And so LaVee and I were talking about that on her podcast. And after that, I did go and do some research and look into, see if there was like articles available or blogs on it or, vloggers, or just I wanted to find out more. And I found some strong and some upset feelings and opinions about this method of upcycling in particular within the plus size community. So that's why today we're digging a little bit deeper into that, because I do think that it's a perspective that needs to be brought to the forefront, and with those varying opinions and data that's available from retail and modeling in the fashion industry on the size that starts the plus size category. So LaVee, like, what size do you consider to be plus size?
That's a great question, actually. That is a hard question to answer in today's current
Yeah.
social context, because we're redefining how we see our bodies, which I'm a big fan of. So,
Hmm.
but I would say typically, just historically speaking, a plus size would be anything above a size 12 here
Hmm.
in the United States. So it's anything that isn't, I would say a better definition would be that anything that isn't mass produced for a small range of sizes. So I would say
Hmm.
even if it's, because I don't know if you've living in New York, you've probably had this experience where you go into like a boutique or a couturier, and the size
Hmm.
range, they don't go up to size 12.
Mm-mm.
There's like four of one garment,
Hmm.
and you may find a size medium-ish size. So they're very, I don't even know what the right term it is, but there's a fat phobia, right? Is maybe the best term to use.
Hmm.
And it starts in high fashion and just trickles its way down to the rest of us.
Even in the department stores, you'll find that it can be categorized as 14 and up. But then in the
Yeah,
modeling industry, a plus size model is like a size 8 to a
there
12
you go.
and up. And even at some modeling agencies, if you're a size 6,
You're out.
you're considered to be a plus size model,
That's
or you're
ridiculous.
no longer, petite enough to model with that particular agency. And especially now that there are more brands beginning to focus on size inclusivity, like Old Navy, for example. I don't know if you heard about them. They said that they're going to be redefining size inclusion and offering every size,
Great.
and there will be no price difference and no separate
Hmm.
department in the stores anymore. So they're going to like reconfigure their entire layout. And you have this happening, and they're of course going to be including models, and they did research on models that went up to size 28 and 30, and they did like a long in-depth study on how to create the patterns and how to fit the different bodies. But then you have in the fashion industry, according to Plus Model magazine, like size 18 and over is considered plus size, which is like a 1x to a 6x.
Hmm.
And so there's so many, it's so hard for you to know,
Yeah.
because there is no one specific cookie cutter response. Like everywhere that you look, it's giving you different information. And while I was reading the International Journal of Fashion Design, Technology, and Education, they published a study back in 2016, and the average American woman wears a size 16 to an 18. And in previous years, the reports were that it was considered a size 14. So
Yeah.
it's something that definitely leaves an individual like, where do I fit in? So, what's your opinion on how thrifters and upcyclers should approach sourcing pieces when upcycling clothes, as opposed to how you see it being done now?
Well, the first thing I would say is stay out of the plus size section, because um, there's such, if you compare, this is like something that I've talked about with male thrifters or male
Hmm.
identified thrifters, is that if you compare the size of the store on who has the most options in shopping. And this is at any store. It's women between that size range that you mentioned, probably up to a size 12 in most stores now. But that's not always the case. It could be even smaller, right? So when you go into the men's section or the plus size section, right, you're going into this limited territory where people who need those clothes are experiencing a dearth, and then you're making their options even smaller, right? So, but is that 100% like you're not allowed in? No, I don't think so. But I think you should be mindful. If you're going to go in, you should be mindful that you're entering scarcity. And you should have a scarcity mindset. Like, if I take this, am I taking from someone else who needs it? Same with the maternity section. Right? Like, there are people in need. And when we're thrifters, when we walk into a thrift store, we're walking into the womb of scarcity, right? Because those are initially designed to serve people who do not have financial means.
Right.
And so it's a mindset we already have. So we just need to be more mindful about taking these larger sizes and turning them into smaller clothes. Because if you just turn around, just turn your body around and look around, there are racks and racks and racks and racks for you. And you're allowed to upcycle those things as much as you want. So when I shop, and let me just say that I am currently plus size to me and to fashion. I'm a size 14. But I haven't always been. Not until my 40s did I start to put on weight and go up the size scale for many reasons. Medication, grad school, all the usual things.
Right.
Parenthood, just the stuff. And it's been actually quite liberating not to worry about my body. But it has been confining in terms of style. So thank you for having this conversation. And I just want people who aren't a plus size to think about it as a problem for us, is that I am a creative person. I want to dress creatively, and I don't always have direct control over what my body looks like. So I need options, right? And if someone takes a muumuu, this is the one that gets me the most because I love vintage muumuus. I have a collection. And then, or a kimono, right? Because there's lots of fabric. And then repurposes it into a short set for a size 4 person. First of all, as a vintage collector, my heart just skips a beat. Like, oh my God, you could have restored that, right? Instead of redesigned it into something modern that later is probably not going to be used. So I don't know. It's really, I think it's a conversation in mindfulness.
Right. And that's what I found that I felt where we had that brief conversation, but then it stayed with me afterwards. It's still with me till now. Because while I was researching it, I realized that it is just mindfulness, and it's something that if it's brought into your atmosphere or into your thought process, then what do you do with that information? You know what I mean? How you approach how you move forward, or how you approach doing these different upcycles and stuff like that, I would assume would then be influenced or changed or impacted, if not changed, or something would happen from that, which I think is what the goal is for that awareness and mindfulness. Because I came across a range of outlooks and opinions about it. There was stuff like, one person was like, well, it's first come, first serve at the thrift store. I'm not going to be thinking about that. Another one, if you're buying larger sizes, buy closer to your own size. Don't be a size 6 or 8 buying a 3X or a 4X. And another person was like, plus size thrifters already have the least amount of options, which is what you were saying. So leave those pieces for the plus size shoppers. Another one was that I saw under a video that I watched from a plus size YouTuber that was talking about this. And their comment was, I'm a plus size woman. I thrift. I have no problems finding things. Stop whining. You sound privileged. And so I was like, wow, I had no idea that this was going on. So thank you as well for bringing this to my attention. Or I don't know if it was even something that you were thinking, oh, intentionally, I'm going to bring this to our attention. But based on our conversation, it did It did something for me personally. I'm just hoping that, in us having this conversation, it's going to enlighten others. And I don't know if it's going to enlighten them to do, but I know for me, it definitely opened my eyes, where as I was just going in maybe before and just doing la 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 la, now I have this thought
Hmm.
of someone else. In transparency, I've personally bought things that are larger than my size. Why? Because I need it for my length. Sometimes when I put
Right,
pants
right,
on that are in my size, they're like at the middle of my shin. And my arms are like, I button up a button down shirt and you're nowhere close to my wrist, so I've had to do that and then make the adjustments for it to fit the rest of my body. Not like multiple and multiple sizes ahead, but this is something that, I have done.
sure.
Not for an upcycling purpose necessarily, like going
But
into
tailoring,
purposefully, yeah, but tailoring, which is different, which is also what I
it is
wanted to,
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
make clear that there's a difference between having to buy something and, tailoring it to fit your body better. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. Today we're talking about the upcycling world that is, I would say, more intentionally going in seeking these larger
Right.
sizes and then transforming them. What are some of the tips or suggestions that you would share with our listeners about thrift etiquette, let's say, as it pertains to upcycling?
I think that's a neat term, thrift etiquette, because I think that's sort of where we're at in the thrifting world. It's like I'm having these same conversations about ethical garment, ethical sourcing of what used to be called ethnic section in the
Hmm.
thrift store, but cultural garments,
Hmm.
right? Being thoughtful about that. Like, are there lots of these? So I think the first one is look at the scope of options. If you're in an area that like I think about the person you mentioned earlier who said, I don't know what everybody's whining about. I find plenty of clothes.
Right.
Well, I live in San Antonio, Texas, and I would agree with that. There's actually a very large plus size population here.
Hmm.
And so I do find a lot of plus size clothes. So this isn't a problem that necessarily directly affects me the same way it does some of my fellow plus size thrifters, right? So, like you, when I see cool things, sometimes I'll buy them and I'll resell them because I want to distribute that.
Hmm.
But a lot of times, because I'm just on the cusp of that plus size world, like you, I'll think of buying something larger and tailoring it because that's a skill I have and one that I will deploy. Um, but then I think, wait, this is a size 18, this is the size 20. How many of those sizes are available here? So
Right.
then I'll go through the rack and I'll look and see. And I think if you just do that, if you start there, I think you'd be surprised
Hmm.
that as the sizes get bigger, the fewer options there are.
Yeah.
So it's not just about you.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
that sink in.
Yeah.
It's not just about you.
I even talked about it with my husband after we talked. It's something that is just such an eye opener
Hmm.
because it's like a trickle down effect where you're lacking size inclusivity in the fashion industry anyway. So
Right,
then you're also going to be lacking donations being given
right.
to the thrift stores in comparison to all of the other sizes that are there endlessly. So it's almost like a continuation and a reflection of what's happening outside of the thrift stores and in
Yes,
the unsustainable side of things, and even in the sustainable options that are available, the prices are not, accessible for everybody.
that's
So
right.
what ends up happening is that you may have a plus size figure woman that has clothes that she's invested in, and she's not going to be quickly donating it. She's actually going to hold
Right.
on to it and be more intentional about how it's cared for. And so that already is limiting the turnover, which limits how much ends up in the thrift stores. So what ends up happening is that for the women and men that financially this is where they have to go to be able to acquire their clothes for whatever purpose it may be in their life, work, school, living, then they're already heading into an area, like you mentioned before, that they're not even like represented equally in comparison, because the thrift stores, they can only put out what they get.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to say more, if that was
Oh,
okay.
absolutely. Yes.
The other thing I think is a good way to look at it is so first, is scope the land, get the lay of the land, and read the room, see if there's enough. If there's enough, carry on.
Mm-hmm.
If there's enough, there's enough, right? Like there's enough for you too. But then talk about where you got it, how you acquired it. So one of the things that I think is important in this thrift community that we're developing online is that we get to have conversations just like this one
Mm-hmm.
about thrifting. And so if you are an upcycler, right, talk about how you sourced the garment, put that out there more.
Mm-hmm.
Like be an ethical sourcer and talk about ethical sourcing and give that more space. And that's how we slowly make these changes that are more inclusive. So there's a reason that Old Navy is revamping their store, and it's because they'll make more money. Let's not be confused about that.
Yeah.
But that is happening because of these conversations that people like you and me are having online.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so I think that's a great thing you can do as a more thoughtful consumer of thrifted items and upcycling is not only think about what you're sourcing and how that might affect the person around you, but then talk about it, give it life. Right.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I would say is one thing I would love to see that I'm not seeing very much of is that, look, when I see some of these flips, I love them. But why you got to make them all small? Why can't you also give back to the community that you're taking from? Right? If you can sew that for you, your skills, you could just bump your skills a little bit to scale it up and sell one to somebody.
Huh.
Give back.
Yeah.
Give back to the community that you might be taking from. Anyway, just a thought.
Yes, because now that you've said that, it's like, okay, well, you may find a dress that you would not wear in the way that it is. And you're thinking, oh, well, let me upcycle this and make it cute. So why not make it cute in an upcycled way in the same size that it is?
Exactly. And I know there can be a fabric loss, but okay, go down one size, right? Don't go from like a 20 to a 2 if you can help that, right? So that thing you said about shopping close to your size, I think that's really great. I love that tip as well. So I affirm that. But if you are going to scale up, be creative for someone plus size like me who may not have the time to upcycle everything. That's my situation. But also some people don't have the skills. Not everybody is creative at the same way. And not everybody has sewing skills, unfortunately. I feel like that's a big loss, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes. I mean, home ec in class is like null and void.
Yeah. And that's a loss. I think we made a mistake there. I think we should have made it gender inclusive.
Yeah. Definitely. I remember in high school for me, it was a class that was there one year and then the next year it was gone. And I was looking forward to the year that I would be able to do it. But by the time I got to that year, it was like, it's not offered anymore. And I don't recall it ever coming back. And that was some time ago. Yeah.
And I hope somebody listening has a podcast about that and would have us on to talk about it, because I'd love to talk about that. You would not believe the amount of young people I see who have really lost a lot of trade craftsman skill. Like if manufacturing of clothing stopped right now, a lot of people would have no clothes.
Yes.
That's where we are. They don't drive, they don't sew, they don't cook, they don't know how to balance right? They don't know how to build a wood thing. They don't, no wood shop either. So we can talk about that. Anybody out there want to talk about that?
Listen, we have our own platforms. We can come back and have another conversation about that if we so choose. Yeah. We can make a table for that and sit at it right by ourselves. We don't even have to wait for somebody else.
And I'm guilty too. I have a child and I've tried to teach them these things, but they are like, no, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you know what? It's like the upcycling process. It's not willy-nilly. You have to put like a lot of imagination into it, first of all. And then you have to have great patience, a great amount of patience. And then time, because there's time that goes into this, and you got to really love it.
I would love to hear from other upcyclers, and maybe this is a question you can answer for me, SHAYZON, is that
Hmm.
When you do take one of these items that we've been talking about and then you turn it into something else, like how many times do you think you wear that?
I am someone that I can say I hold on to my things for a very long time. I still
Okay.
have a couple of things that I have a couple of things that were from my senior year that I still have
Oh my
in
God,
high
that's so
school
cool.
and in college and stuff. So I have things that I hold on to like more than 10 years, more than 20 years. So I'm that person where I do get connected to my things, and then I think about like my grandchildren and them coming to my house to play and stuff and whatever. Which I don't have any grandchildren, but that just shows you how far ahead I'm thinking and wanting them to have that opportunity to like appreciate things that have a history and have a story. So for me, when I do stuff, because in terms of like upcycling or making things, I am intentionally shopping um, for fabrics. I'm intentionally making things because
Yeah.
I know I want to hold on to them for a really long time. So I wear my things and I hold on to them for a long, 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 long time. Probably more than the average person.
I like hearing that. That's reassuring. And maybe if there's some plus size thrifters listening to this episode, that is reassuring to them too. And I,
Hmm.
I think sort of on social media is where we're learning about all these things because we can see them. I don't know that I even knew that this was happening before social media.
Right.
So, hearing that, maybe that's something that could be added to the conversation is like, hey, I may not post pictures of me wearing this all the time, but I do wear this all the time.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
on social media you don't see as many repeats of things, or maybe you
Hmm.
just don't observe them because everything looks new all the time.
Yeah.
So it's very reassuring to hear, like, oh, hey, you took that moo you made it into a short set, but you've worn it a lot, like that. Okay, I feel better. But leave the moo alone.
I don't know if you thought of it this way, but in the thrifting community, we talk about overconsumption,
Yeah.
but that can happen very much so within the thrifting community because it's inexpensive and all of that kind of stuff. That can become a conversation as well. Because if you're just buying something just for the pictures or
Mm,
just for that moment and then tossing it aside, you're actually not doing anything different than outside of the thrift store, buying from the mainstream stores and, wearing it one time and putting it away.
yeah, I can definitely make some improvements there. Being a child, I was born in the 70s, but I grew up really being a shopper in the 80s and 90s.
Hmm.
That is definitely a leftover problem I have is
Hmm.
is overconsumption. And I think part of it too is that to get back to the psychology of it, right, is
Hmm.
that I have scarcity mindset sometimes
Yeah.
because that's how I grew up,
Yeah.
being mobile all the time. My closet was like five things,
Hmm. Hmm.
So I just had a tiny closet. So yeah, I mean, I think I'll be working on that. So maybe I'll make a deal with your listeners. If they're working on ethical sourcing of fabrics, I'm going to be working on consuming less, even at the thrift store.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's just like the simplest of steps because I will say that my whole thing before I became fully aware of that, I love fashion and I love creating looks and all of that kind of stuff. So the
Mm-hmm.
consumption situation in my world was intense,
Same.
especially with the thrifting. So I will say that, completely upfront. But I will also say that of recent years, becoming more aware of like overconsumption, that what happens for me is when I go to the thrift store, I'm not just picking it up just because, oh my God, it's so inexpensive, or oh, that's cute,
Mm-hmm.
or oh, this fits me, because I had the other side of the problem of being very, very slim, very tiny, and nothing fitting me or looking good on me because I had no curves, so everything just hung. And so as I started getting older, because I grew up with nothing really fitting me, it was just always like, okay, well, you
Mm.
layer up to make it look like it fits, or you
You
put
put a
on the
belt on
belts and
everything.
everything. It's like belts that are double wrapped around your waist kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening for me, which I became aware of, was that when I started shopping for myself and started finding things that would fit me,
Yeah.
I was like floored. I was so happy. I was so flattered, which was not even anything being done for me, but I would just try something on. I was like, I felt like, wow, I'm now becoming a part of what's seen as normal because I grew up
Right.
feeling abnormal. And so I would just buy something because it actually fit me, whether I loved it or not. I just felt so good about the fact that I fit into something properly. And so that stuck with me for quite some time without me even realizing it, that many of the things that I bought is just because of how good I felt in that moment to know that something fit me without me having to alter it, or I
Right.
so that became the purpose behind a lot of the things that I would get, whether I would end up wearing them multiple times or not. And it stacked up quickly. And so again, like I was saying, of recent years, I became aware of why I was buying things like that. And I had to like say, it's okay. Like, that's like a childhood thing that was lingering along with me into my adult years that I had to kind of acknowledge and try to release.
Hmm.
Um, so now I hold myself accountable when I'm in the thrift store. Like if I'm going to buy something from the thrift store, the vintage store, anywhere, I have to love it. Like I know I'm going to hold on to it. Like I'm doing a happy dance. Other than our basics, of course, it's like, we need our foundational basics. We don't really have to feel excited about them. We just need them. So that's how it's working for me. But as far as like the whole consumption thing, I mean, I could never walk around and say, oh, I'm like a minimalist and I have like a capsule wardrobe. My capsule is like the size of a rocket
Never. I'm
ship.
never doing that. Never. Well, I'm just putting it out there now. I'm never doing that.
Right.
Yeah,
I
maybe if
just,
somebody puts me in a nursing home
yeah.
or something someday, I'll be forced to. But like, yeah, I'm not going back to that capsule wardrobe
But
shit.
you know what? I could totally see myself having stuff like stocked underneath my bed in that place. I would have them rolled up like Twizzlers.
Totally,
Yeah,
right?
that I am not taking that pledge to come down to 5 things in my wardrobe. I'm just not. I'm just going to find other ways to contribute.
It's just not my
Yeah,
personality.
yeah,
And look,
no.
if you take the store from me, I'm bringing my sewing machine out.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's important to end this conversation with the idea that look, you should be
Yeah,
yourself, right? These ideas aren't meant to make you someone else.
yeah,
It's just being mindful that it's not just about you.
yeah,
You're awesome, you're important, but so are other
yeah,
people, right?
yeah.
And so that idea of inclusivity is what's really important here. If my closet is the only one that gets to be full,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
that's not cool. So refreshing is probably the way that I am the most mindful as a consumer is of course being thoughtful before you
Mm-hmm.
get out your wallet, but also being willing to pass stuff on. Like if I'm not wearing it, let me pass this on.
Yeah,
So, keeping it rotating is
yeah.
probably how I justify my maximalism.
Mm-hmm.
But as a plus size thrifter, I have that same thing, SHAYZON, where I'm like, oh my God, it fits. I'm buying it.
Yeah.
It's because I'm so excited that it
Uh-huh.
fits. But then I'm like, well, am I willing to stand in line for it? Am I willing to make space for it in my closet?
Uh-huh.
And am I willing to, do all these other things? I have to have a little talk with myself.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
feel you.
LaVee, thank you so much for your transparency and for enlightening me even more today. I'm always eager to learn and share. So, I mean, I just so truly appreciate you being here with me today and going into this conversation, um, and seeing, the different perspectives on this topic. So, before we go any further, please let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, if you want to see all my cool thrifted stuff, head on over to Instagram, and I'm at Thrift Therapy Style, just spelled all the normal ways. Thrift Therapy Style. And I have a podcast called Thrift Therapy. And so you can find that on all the platforms. Let's see, what are they? Apple Podcast or iTunes,
Mm-hmm.
whichever they're
Mm-hmm.
going by these days, Spotify, Google Play, and a lot of podcatchers out there. So maybe go follow the podcast so that you can get notifications of the new episodes. And one of them will be with the host, SHAYZON. So
Yay!
I look forward to that.
Yeah. As we close, I've thought about the awesomeness and benefits of thrifting in many ways. One main of the recent years is, the ability and importance of extending the life of our clothes and delaying the inevitable, which is our clothes ending up in the landfills or incinerators. It's known, there's information out there. 84% of clothing ends up in landfills and incinerators, and these textiles take like 200 plus years to decompose in these landfills. And, some people are like, well, why is this such a concern? Like, why do I need to think about this? Or, what does this have to do with me? Well, the textiles generate greenhouse gas, and it's like the methane gas, and this leaks toxic chemicals and dyes into the groundwater and our soil. And so, I see upcycling clothes as a very big part of my life and as another amazing way to reimagine our garments so we can enjoy them more and hold on to them even longer. And I honestly, before meeting LaVee, never considered how these pieces that I chose when thrifting may impact someone else. And my thoughts had just always been directed at the ultimate goal as a collective, like do our part, no matter how small, to positively help the environment. And after today, I can say my eyes have been opened to an even uh, bigger level, in another area that I feel is important as well. And will I continue to upcycle? Absolutely. That's going to continue happening.
Good.
Will I consider the pieces I choose for upcycling differently? Yes, absolutely. Because now I'm going to ask myself some additional questions about the pieces before I decide. And this is my personal pledge to my upcycling life and world. Before buying it, I want to make sure that I've just paused and asked myself a couple of things. I appreciate LaVee for being a part of the conversation. So, guys, this is the wrap up. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, download, review, and share the skin with others. Let us know your thoughts and takeaways and give us your feedback on the moments that stood out to you most today in this episode. You can always find us at our main portal, SHAYZON.com, and that's SHAYZON.com. And for all the goodies and the latest updates on the show, you can head over to Instagram and follow at SHAYZON. And again, it's the same. Everything, I try to keep it really simple. SHAYZON. And at that same place, you will find a sneak peek inside the life of the voice behind the mic, which is mine. So you've been listening to the Skinny with SHAYZON. Thank you so much for sharing your time and light with me in this space where you are heard, seen, valued, and loved. Never forget you're beautiful and deserve to live a happy and empowered life. Meet you back here for next week's episode. Bye.